Okay, thank you for having me here today. I appreciate the opportunity, and I understand the instructions, and so therefore I'd like to go ahead and tell you or try to answer the #1 question that is being asked of me. Why would a judge, 21 years on the bench, 4 more years on her term, why would she resign to run for state attorney? I bet you were going to ask me that question.
I was going to ask
you were going to ask that question.
I'm sure you was.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, okay. Well, let me give you a little bit of background about myself first. That might help answer that question because you just can't answer it in a nutshell. Let me tell you, I was born and raised in Detroit, Michigan. And when I grew up in the inner city, and we moved when I was in 9th grade to a suburb, and basically my father was a milkman, and he told us girls, I have an older sister, 1.5 years, just the 2 of us, he told us girls, you kids are going to get an education. That was the main thing. My mother only had a middle school education. They're immigrants from Greece, my grandparents were, and a hard-working family. And my dad said, in my generation, you were going to be a school teacher. That was going to be the profession. You were either going to be a school teacher or a nurse or secretary, I think. Those were the 3 options. And Dad said, you're going to go to college and you're going to be a... And so as I was progressing in high school, and they had those standardized tests then, I didn't do very well on those tests, and based on the test, the teacher said, I'm sorry, you just don't have the capability of going to college. You just can't do it. Your scores aren't high enough. So anyway, I thought those tests, well, you can imagine what I thought about those tests. But anyway, those standardized tests that were, I think, culturally geared because I came from a different school system. But in any event, I had to go to college, and I told them I was going to do that. So there I went. I went to college, and I became that school teacher, went to Michigan State University. So I go back and I do my student teaching at the same school that the teachers were that told me that, not that I like to throw anything in anyone's face, that is, but I managed to let them know I had to do it, and but I really wanted to be a lawyer, but Dad said, we can't afford to send you to law school. So I taught school, and I taught in Australia. I had the opportunity to go overseas and teach, and I did that. I taught in Newport Richey, taught also in Detroit. But my passion was really to become a lawyer. I was kind of the Perry Mason. Not so much to get people off, but to do justice, to seek justice. So that was my passion. So I went to law school and got married and divorced. And in the meantime, and had 1 son. His name is Adam, and Adam is now running for county court judge in Volusia County, taking after his mother. My first job was an assistant state attorney in 1980 under Steve Boyles, the state attorney at that time. As an assistant state attorney, I would have paid Steve Boyles to do the job I was doing. I loved it. It was so satisfying when you could do the right thing. You could either prosecute the case or dismiss a case. I remember Judge Carnell, you probably don't know him from... And I had an 85-year-old lady who was a kleptomaniac. And he said to me, Stasia, if you prosecute that lady, or you're prosecuting that lady, I'm going to put her in jail for 10 days. And I said, but she's got an illness, Judge. I mean, she didn't mean to take that piece of candy or whatever. It's just kind of a problem she has. She really needs treatment. No, I'm going to do it. Well, next day in court, I announced that I was going to dismiss the charge and get her treatment or something. And he said, boy, and I thought, you're a judge and you have certain powers, but really the state attorney has a different kind of power, and you are not going to, as far as I was concerned, he was not doing the right thing in that case. And so I got her some help, and I felt good about it. And that's what I mean about that kind of job. You can really do the right thing. Anyway, I met my husband along the way. He will tell you, he was a criminal defense lawyer at this stage. Oh, by the way, my husband was Dan Warren. He was elected state attorney 50 years ago this year. So you can go back to your records and see if in September of this year. I found a little card because I thought I was a pack rat. I'd like you to meet the real pack rat of the family. He had boxes and boxes of files. In fact, I have so many of your records, St. Augustine records, during the St. Augustine racial crisis. He kept all the newspaper clippings. So I have all your original newspaper clippings from when in the 60s, when he was up here. But in any event, I met Dan. He would tell you that he beat me in the case that we had together, and that's how we met. I was prosecuting, and he was defending. And in any event, we got together, we got married, and while I was at the state attorney's office. And then I joined his practice after a while and learned the criminal defense part of it, which was great because at that point, having been a prosecutor, then I do the defense aspect of it, and I have the best mentor of them all, former state attorney, highly sought after criminal defense lawyer, and I learned an awful lot. And then after that, in 1990, I decided to use those two, that experience to run for judge. I thought it was a good background to be a good county court judge. And it was a perfect, it suited me perfectly. And for the past 21 years, having been on the bench, it was great. I could do an awful lot. But in the past years, I noticed that things were, from the state attorney's office, was going downhill. In fact, let me go ahead and clear up this one rumor. A lot of people ask me, and you might be wondering, why did John Tanner put you up to this? And I have to tell you,
hadn't heard that one.
You hadn't heard that one. It didn't filter this far. Well, I believe y'all had Terry Shoemaker up here, an attorney in town here that was also running, but he stepped down to support me, and I understand that he had discussions with Mr. Tanner to run, but Mr. Tanner in no way, shape, or form had come to me to see if I would run against Larissa. So I just wanted to, in fact, I think Larissa would clear that up by letting you all know, and if he hadn't already, that when he got elected, I told him after his election, that the reason I didn't run against Tanner in that particular race that he did was because Mr. Tanner gave my son Adam his first job here in St. Augustine as a prosecuting attorney. And my feeling was that you don't bite the hand that feeds you. But I warned Mr. Larissa that I'll be watching you because, and if you're not doing the job that I think you need to do, then I may see in 3-4 years. So in any event. So that was, and I discussed with my husband just before he died, which was sudden death. We were on the St. Johns River. We have a little home over there, and we were on the river. And I told Dan, I said, I'm just not doing enough. I'm just, you become a public servant, and you just feel like you're just not accomplishing anything. You've kind of done it all, and you have to move on in a career. And I said, I really would like to run for state attorney. And he said, whatever you want to do, he would support me. I said, remember the days that you've told me how you did things? He said, yes, but I never slept at night. He says, I always worried what my assistants were doing to me when I went to sleep. And so, and at that point, you didn't have as many. I think there's around between 80 and 85, but it depends on what day, because that, you talk about a revolving door. That state attorney's office is pretty much a revolving door over there right now. They don't seem to keep the assistants, which I would like to bring back. That's one of the things I want to do. I want to make that office more of a career for someone who loves that kind of work. And there are a lot of people, and right now there's so many lawyers out there that want jobs and need jobs. And to think that some of these young people are leaving that job, and I asked them, since I've been campaigning, I said, why did you leave? And I'm not appreciated. There's no equal pay type of thing. We have all this in layers of administration that you have to go to, and and I knew a lot of this, but I wanted to find out firsthand what they were thinking. I mean, to go from the frying pan into the fire out in private practice in this day and time when there's not a whole lot to do. I mean, a lot of cases, people are using the public defender, the economy is bad, and people aren't even foreclosing on houses because they have to pay huge filing fees. I mean, it's just bad times right now. So in any event, that's one of the things I would really like to change, bring that office back to the way it used to be. So I guess my reason for running is that I felt like I could do more, and the timing, everything in the law, as I was taught, is timing. And this is the time that I feel that we need to make some changes. And knowing the criminal justice system as I do, from the inside and out and all around, and having this knowledge and experience, I think I can bring so much more to that office. I've traveled the circuit, I've talked to law enforcement. You know, the state attorney is the chief law enforcement officer of the circuit. There's one person you've got to talk to, and that's your law enforcement agencies. I am so proud to tell you today that I have the Volusia Deputies Association and the Daytona Beach Police Officers Association endorsing me for my candidacy. And they told me that they're supporting me because they want to have a new direction, new leadership in the office, and they believe that I can bring that to the office. They supported my opponent last time. Well, I assured them that there's one thing we were going to do, and that was communicate. I'm going to go back to the way it used to be when I was prosecuting. You call in the law enforcement officers and you call in the victims in cases. That's the very first thing you do. It's the basic thing you do. You have to be informed as an assistant prosecutor. There's also going to be, everyone's going to be handling a caseload. We're not going to have this layer and layer of administration as we do. And the pay that was promised is going to be more on merit. That was not done in the office, and that's what the assistants have told me. You have to understand that as a judge, I was like the training ground for the prosecutors. I mean, they'd throw in a prosecutor that didn't know how to put in evidence into a case. And you can't, as a judge, you really can't help one side and not the other. So it was always kind of good when I had a brand new public defender and a brand new prosecutor, because I could do a little bit of both. But you get somebody like Dan Warren in there and a prosecutor, and in a nice way, I'm sure my husband would chew this other person out, and I can't be helping them because I'd be called down on it, and I can't do that. I want to bring integrity back to this office. That is an area that is very, very dear to me. I don't want even the appearance. See, my standard is an appearance of impropriety. And if you want to talk about this other case off the record, this Lightsey case, I'd like to talk to you about that sometime, because that is a case that really disturbs me. That was the murder case up here, that a woman was brutally murdered, and it's horrible. I know about it because my son worked at the office at the time, and I've talked to people that were involved in the case. But see, that was another area. Domestic violence is another area of that I sat as a judge for over 8 years in the specialized court of domestic violence, and victims are not being serviced in this. And I have tons of cases that where victims were not even advised. Our Constitution and our statute requires that victims be notified, that they have an opportunity to be heard at every stage of a proceeding, just like a defendant. They have basically the same rights that a defendant has. At critical stages, they need to be advised of what's going on with their cases. And that's not being done. People are reading about it in the paper, not being consulted. Restitution issues aren't being addressed. And those things need to be handled properly. The state attorney's office, under my administration, will go to the judge, and when restitution is determined, we will push for an income deduction order. It's none of this, well, we'll go on probation and we're going to get right to the source, just like a child support case. We can get the money right from the paycheck to the victims. So we need to follow the law and enforce the law. And if we don't do that, then our victims will be out in the cold. And that's not how we're going to treat victims. And every case has a victim. It's been stated in that office that DUI cases, there are no victims. Well, there's a victim in every case. In a drunk driving case, you don't have victims. If the victim died, you have the victim's family. I mean, they're the decedents. I mean, they need to be consulted. Do they have to read about their child's death in the paper when the case gets reduced to something else? No. It's going to be explained to them that if it has to be reduced for some reason or another, they're going to be told why. People want answers. People need closure. That's one thing I've learned being on the bench, and even in private practice. I'm going on and on again. But
I'll ask you a question.
Okay, go ahead.
According to the current state attorney in the district, conviction rates are up to their all-time high of almost 90% versus 82%, and dismissals are down. How do you respond to that?
Well, I'm so glad you asked. Well, they've gotten higher since the last forum that I've been in, but that's okay. In any event, he's playing this numbers game. And I would like to ask him, and I can't wait for our debate, and if he gets to see this sooner.
When is that?
I would. This is going to be on the Mark Bernier show, where he's going to have us both. I think it's next week sometime.
Okay, just curious.
But in any event, that's one of the questions I'd like to ask him, how he arrives at a conviction. Did he by any chance tell you that if the case starts off as a felony, let's say, and then he reduces it to a misdemeanor, but then he decides to make it a deferred prosecution agreement, and he signs them up for that agreement, that still counts as a conviction? So that would be the number one question I would have, is how he arrives at these convictions. And then my other question would be, what are the number of cases that he's actually trying? I understand that we have 1% of the cases that actually go to trial. So is he talking about his conviction rate based on trials, or is he looking at his statistics based on what he files in the resolution of the case? So if you're only trying 1% of the total amount of cases that you have, then from what I understand, he's losing more than he's trying, than he's winning. So we need to get some...
So by that, you're saying that he's not have the higher conviction rate than when they came into office, and they're not filing the same number or larger number of cases?
They're not. That I know. As far as what previously was the conviction rate under the administration, but see, the tallies that they do in-house, and then they send that to the state. So the only basis we have is what they manufacture for us. You see, it's not like it's an outside audit of the cases. Now, what the audit I'm doing is looking at the clerk's docket, and when I see a DUI case being reduced to a reckless, they count that as a conviction. I wouldn't count that as a conviction because it's not an as charged. So I think that the public needs to know about that. Law enforcement has told me that unless they hand the state attorney's office a case on the silver platter that they will definitely win, they don't want it. You see, because they're worried about statistics. He's been worried about statistics from day one. I'll tell you right now, I'm not going to worry about statistics. You give me a date rape case and that girl wants to go to trial because it's a he said, she said, we're going to try it. I was trying them all day long in domestic violence court. I have no problem. You get a 9/11, you get a good 9/11 tape on there, excited utterance. You don't even need the victim. in those cases to prosecute and get convictions. But no, those are the tough cases that you need to give the victims their day in court. And I'm gonna go for those, win or lose. At least someone's going to feel like they got their day, and they always did with me in court. No matter what they may have lost. I have letters written to me from people that lost their case, and they say, you know, Judge Warren, you ruled against me, but you know what? You let me say everything I needed to say, and I'm thinking, I did my job. So
let me ask, there's been a lot of press, there's been a lot of outcry, there's been a lot of discussion about the recent events, particularly in Jacksonville, and I think one in Clay County, of the 1020 life law, where the discharge of a firearm in the commission of a crime is a mandatory 20. The most recent discussion was the lady who fired into the ceiling in defense supposedly of a battering husband. Can you talk about your views on the adjudication of that, or that law, or
the only problem with, I can talk to you generally about those things, but yeah. The problem with, you know, a lot of people have asked me about the Trayvon Martin case and all that kind of
thing. That's a stand your ground.
Stand your ground type of, yes, right. It is different, but I mean, they'll ask me about cases that are in the press. You're gonna ask, okay, well, I'll leave that one alone then. I'll let you ask about that. But the idea is, when they ask me about cases that are in the press, you have to understand I'm only getting a certain view of it, and I'll tell people I don't have all the facts, and I don't know what I would do in a particular case, because I don't have all the information. I'm sure that they want me to be apprised of everything, of all the facts before I make a decision. But I'm going to, my position will be, I will investigate, and if I believe that I can stand a conviction in those kind of cases, then I will proceed with the prosecution of the cases. I am not going to change the legislature. I think the legislature has talked. I may be proactive, but like a judge, I don't make the laws, and I explain that to people. I follow the sentencing guidelines. I follow those guidelines. As the prosecutor, I will follow the law and seek the penalties as provided by law. It's up to the legislature to change those.
Okay. Same thing on stand your ground, which is a little bit different, because the prosecutors have a bit of discretion, do they not, in how that charge is filed?
Well, I think it's going to be really up to the judge to decide whether or not that person had the right to stand their ground. But as the prosecutor, I would like to bring it before the court and have that opportunity, or bring it before a grand jury, because that law needs to probably be tweaked a little bit. But basically, you just don't have to, under the law right now, you just don't have to retreat as you would normally. But the question is, where are you when this is all happening? And I always would like to think that even though the law may say I can stand right there, but I may want to, discretion is the better part of valor, or whatever. So, yeah. Anyway.
Okay. I'll ask another question, and I'll shut up and let these folks have a shot at you. How's that?
That's good.
You talked in your opening statements and in your bio submission about partnership with victims, and you spoke about restitution of victims being notified in regard. Can you speak a little bit more to that?
Sure. We need victim advocates. They seem to be eliminated from the state attorney's office. I don't know for what reason. If it's budgetary, they may claim that it is. But when you can increase a salary of some of these administrators that are making $120,000, $125,000, and even in the past 60 days increase them another $5,000, and I've been looking at some of those salaries, it's over the top. I just don't understand why that money, more money, can't be sought to help victims, and more prosecutors, and give the prosecutors, when a secretary can make almost $60,000, a misdemeanor secretary can make $60,000, and a prosecutor with a law degree make $42,000. There's something wrong with this picture. And that's not right. I don't know what a misdemeanor secretary, not to demean secretaries because they're very valuable, but I think that we have some real budget problems with under this administration.
Okay. Stuart, Margo?
Stuart, you?
Go ahead, Margo.
Okay. Mrs. Warren, you talked about these administrators.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure what you mean. If you could elaborate on that,
Okay.
because, you know, I'm thinking there's a state attorney, assistant state attorneys, investigators, people who speak to the media.
Right.
So I'm not sure what
Okay.
the layers of administration are you're talking about.
I'm so glad that you asked me, because we have the state attorney, and then you have, I guess he's called a first assistant, which you can, as state attorney, you can make up your administration any way you want.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have another layer of administration. I don't know what they're called, whether they're called supervisors or managers. And then there's another layer. For instance, my son was just an assistant, making $52,000 after 7 years with the office. Okay? Secretaries were making more than my son. That's all right. My son loved that job. He really did. He just loved it so much. In any event, okay, so he has to answer to a manager. Now that manager had to answer to another woman. If I give you names, but it doesn't really matter. And then that person had to answer to the first assistant, which answered to. So those are the layers. Now the manager didn't have my son's first manager didn't have a caseload. That other person didn't have a caseload. That other manager, that other supervisor, and of course the first assistant didn't have a caseload.
And this is all in the 7th Circuit?
Yes, this is in Volusia County for sure. I don't know how many different layers there are up here. Now let's see, Adam said that he answered pretty much to one, Chris France, and then I guess Chris France answered to Mathis, and I think Mathis probably answered to, so there's several there, but they didn't have some of these managers and supervisors didn't have caseloads. They did not, and then they have another a supervisor that managed the misdemeanor division, but he was never to be seen in the courtroom assisting the new prosecutors to prosecute the misdemeanor cases. So I don't know what these people do.
So how would you structure it based on your experience, what you know from the inside, from your son's experience, and just general knowledge of the prosecutors that come before you? How would you structure that office?
Everyone's going to have a caseload. You have to have all your attorneys need to handle cases. It may be a different amount of cases, but they're all going to have to handle them. They're going to partner with each other, because if you have all these new people, they need help. They cannot be thrown into the courtroom and expected to do the work. In fact, I saw one judge who was so frustrated the other day. He basically said that he had it up to there with the state attorney's office, and I have a copy of the transcript because I couldn't believe that a judge in open court said something like I was feeling. So it made me feel kind of good that I wasn't the only one who was experiencing this. So everyone will have a caseload, and it's going to be not like you have to do this. It's going to be more of a camaraderie, the way it used to be when I worked in the office. You're going to inspire them to want to be there and not to leave the building at 5 o'clock or 4:30, whatever. I mean, you're going to want them to work on these cases and enjoy it, and you're not going to be handing them off. And this is where you lose the continuity and the efficiency of the office, because when you have a certain system like they have right now, then the case gets transferred to this other person, then to another person, and before you know it, there's so many different attorneys on the case. The defense lawyer, the law enforcement officer doesn't know who they can contact. Victims don't know who to contact. They'll call the office. First of all, they'll get an answering machine that will say they're not available to take the call right now, and then eventually when they get to a secretary, that secretary doesn't answer the phone. I mean, it's very frustrating. I don't like these machines. They're going to have to go, because there's got to be some secretary that's available to answer the phone, at least just to take the number. Victims, I mean, I get emails every day from people saying, help me, help me. And so everyone will have that work, and be one prosecutor to one law enforcement officer and one victim who will see the case through. They'll be accountable, and they'll like it though. But see, we liked it when we were accountable.
And so you would return the
I would return to
advocates.
Oh yes,
back,
yes,
and probably have enough so that their load is focused on the victim that needs to be served at the time, so they're not overwhelmed themselves.
Exactly, exactly. They can do so much for that office. Because I was on the
and nobody's doing it now.
No, no, they're not doing it now. They've eliminated, for the most part, as many, too many. I think that, and they've left too. I know of one that just had to leave, because you can't be expected to do everything be the only one there.
So I'll just tag on to that a little bit, but the state and all aspects of state agencies have been affected by the economic downturn. I think my notes say that their budget's been cut by more than $2 million. How do you address that level of service, that level of interaction, that level of program with a huge budget deficit or expenses being reduced?
Well, first of all, you don't just accept that you swallow what they've done to you. You really have to go out and fight for the money and not to be cut. You just don't accept that, because as the state attorney in that office, what you're charged with, you have to protect the public. And if you're out there screaming for money, and isn't that who gets the money, who the people who are screaming for the money, it seems like, you just don't accept it. You have to go out there and you have to aggressively not let that happen to begin with. And then there's grant money out there, federal funds, victim money. You go after all that kind of money. Don't let that just not happen. Go after this grant money, and you get some good grant writers in there, which we've had in the past. And I know how to work that system. You partner with some of these other agencies, and you're able to use them. You partner with the community. You have to. Like, I was on the rape crisis board before that got dissolved. Now, there's so many physicians and so many nurses that want to come back and work in the community, and you can bring all this together. I don't know. I get so many ideas, they're just running through my head. I just want to say.
Margaret Stewart, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to jump back in.
No, that was a good question.
I
was moving towards the budget, but I was taking longer than you did, so Stewart.
Well, the only question I have really is, you talk a lot about Volusia County. Obviously, you have tons of experience there. What do you see? I mean, why should people in St. Johns County vote for you? What do you know about St. Johns County? What do you want to see in St. Johns County improved upon?
You know, the questions that you all are asking me, I'm feeling like I wrote the questions for you, and I'm so glad you asked me that. I really feel comfortable with this, because you know a man by the name of Ron Griffin. I can tell you what I know about St. Johns County, because my son was prosecuting here, and he just left last summer when my husband became, my husband died suddenly, but he was slowing down. And I think that aneurysm that he had that ultimately killed him ruptured. But Adam came home last summer to live, because he wanted to spend more time. And so he transferred to Volusia County. But up until then, he was here in St. Johns County. And so he told me about the demoralizing office that was here. And it had to do with a man that Larissa hired, and I don't know the exact relationship, but I know, and I have the reports, that an investigator did, because this man was a friend of Larissa's, and he would tell people in the office when he got questioned about something, he would say, well, I'm good friends with the boss, type of thing. And it's like, watch what you say to me, basically. And that, all the other people got upset with that. So the investigator put a tracking device on this investigator. And those are the reports that I have. And they found that he was using the vehicle, because as investigators, they give apparently a vehicle for them to drive. And you're supposed to use it for business purposes only. But he was using it to do other things. In fact, my son told me that he was supposed to pick up a witness, a DNA. Adam had a trial, and they needed a DNA expert, and he didn't pick her up on time. He was doing something else. So they calculated all his mileage, and it turned out that he was abusing his office, this friend of the state attorney's. He was abusing his office, and by using taxpayers' money that pays for his gas for some other purpose. And I'm still investigating what this other purpose is. So I've gotten the public records from Volusia as to what was going on here. But what they did is they transferred him out of here because the staff was so disheartened that they transferred him to Flagler to babysit him there. And that was not a good situation. So then they transferred him to Daytona, and I don't think he lasted too much longer. So I don't know if he resigned or he was terminated. Exactly what happened. But these are the questions I'm going to ask Mr. Rizza when we go on that debate. I want to know exactly, even though I have two reports, one had to be cleaned up apparently a little bit, so we have two copies of those reports. So what will I do in St. John's? Well, I'm going to have it's going to be basically the same philosophy is going to transpire here. Everyone will have a caseload, and I have a home here in St. Johns County, so I'll be around. I have a condominium here. I've owned it since 2005, and
bought it at the low part of the market, huh?
No, yeah, right. I couldn't get rid of it today. I'm going to be living in it because it's just.
So I take that to mean that you will probably physically spend time in the office in St. Augustine, the office in Palatka,
Yes.
as well as the offices in Flagler
Absolutely.
and Volusia.
I think it's great to be able to have the two homes and be able to be back and forth and have a presence in the community. We are the community, the state attorney's office. I'll have to get out there. See, as a judge, I've been so isolated, and I hadn't realized how isolated I had been. And I've been able to unzip my mouth and talk, and it's like, oh my goodness, what am I saying?
So
Can I edit this before it goes public?
So you will actually, you won't just show up, you will actually have some reason to be there, meet with staff, find out give advice on the caseloads and on cases. I take it you would like maybe work part of a day in
absolutely.
all those places too.
Exactly.
That sounded like where you were going.
Exactly, and you articulated it so much better than I can because my mind is just racing. So much information.
Let me go back to something you talked about the layers of the administration handling caseload work and the discrepancies or disparities that you believe exist in the compensation structure. How would you change the compensation structure for those attorneys and for the administrators that are there?
Well, you have to, first of all, value the experience that they bring. So you adjust the pay according to what they're doing for the office. And I don't know exactly how much money I will have in my budget. Unfortunately, the budget doesn't run on an annual year, and so we're already into the new budget. So by the time I take office in January, then I'll have a budget that I'll have to work with for 6 months, and I don't know how much money I'll have. And so between the time of August and the end of the year, I am going to learn and circulate among the circuits to find out exactly what the fairest. I'm going to seek out experts. Administrators are not the best. Sometimes attorneys are not the best administrators. I think we sometimes need to get a CPA, people that do audits and things like that.
So you're talking about maybe a compensation study or a survey.
Yes, exactly.
But really, my question is really more philosophical of, do you see it from more of an experience-based system to a merit-based system to a pay for performance for a reward type system? I guess would be my question of how you want to restructure.
Well, you go experience and you go merit and you really, but the satisfaction, the bonuses and that kind of thing, that doesn't play well with me, because the bonus is going to be the satisfaction. You want to get people in an office like that who are doing the job because they want that kind of work like I did. That will be their bonus, those are the kind of rewards that they'll have from personal satisfaction. When you train people, and being the former school teacher that I am, I love the training part of it. You get the training. When you train people to do the right thing, you give them discretion, and that's what they're lacking in that office. So if you don't have the training and give them discretion, that's what people want to be assistants for. They want to be able to make those hard decisions. So they run it by someone else more experienced. But between the two of them, or three of them, whatever it takes to find the right solution, that's the satisfaction they're going to get. So I don't know if I probably didn't answer that question the way you wanted me to answer, but it's just...
I just wanted you to answer it the way you believe.
Yeah.
Is training, it sounds to me like training is more on the job.
Yes.
Than a pro forma part, welcome to the office,
Yeah.
So many days you're on probation, but you have to do the following training. I'm not getting that when you talk about people being just kind of thrown into a case.
They're thrown into the courtroom.
Into the courtroom, rather.
Yes,
Not paired with somebody of experience.
Exactly. We don't
or
have
someone
any of that.
evaluating how they did, or
Exactly.
I guess
you said it all right there. Now let's go over that. They're not. When you come out of law school, you don't get the courtroom training that you need. You get the legal. The legal stuff, but you don't really know how to perform in the courtroom. And so you need guidance. You need to know how to go through presenting evidence to the jury, how to talk to the jury. I don't see any of that kind of training going on. Now, he may say he has some because he said that on an interview, that he had so many training groups. Well, I asked my son about it. I said, had you been offered any training? And he said no. And I actually sent my son to a place for DNA because he was interested in DNA. And so he became the expert in the office on DNA evidence. So so I'd like to see about getting training. Well, you say, well, if there's no money to get training, where are you going to do it? Well, guess what? There's a lot of former assistants that are out there that I was in the prosecutor's office with, that are standing by to come in and help with the office. A lot of them are retired. But I mean, what about it, you guys? Will you come back and help us out? No problem. We'd love to. They don't need the money. I mean, they're retired. But they were longtime prosecutors, 20 years, that had worked at that office under the Boyles administration. They're eager to come back and pro bono help us out, critique these lawyers in the courtroom. You can't ask the judges to do it. The judges don't want to be bothered with they can't do it. It's not that they can't be bothered, really. They just can't not ethically sit there and tell one prosecutor what they should have done. Now, afterwards, if they've come to me before, and if both of them come to me and they want to know what I thought, I would suggest to them that they might have handled something differently. But it's just that there has to be more training and partnering with someone with more experience in the office, because that is very helpful to have somebody to run things by, talk to. I mean, we never, if you can imagine our dinner conversations, there was never a boring night besides my son Adam, my husband, and I mean, myself. I mean, our dinner conversations were always about the law, and so I think there would be a lot more training going on. Was there anything else along those lines?
I had a question to follow on the compensation study too, because I take it that a secretary making $62,000, it may be based on expertise and experience and those kinds of things. I mean, you might find out in this compensation study that's a valued salary for what the benefit or valued employee.
Well, this one I was talking about that made 60, she came with him from private practice, and but she came in as a high-level administrator under him, but ultimately she was transferred to a different secretarial position, the one I'm thinking about. Okay. But her co-workers that she's sitting next to is making 20 at that same job, and if you're going to put someone in 60, at least put them up under the administration, in my office, say, as opposed to putting them next to a person only making 20. So my husband's secretary is working for that office now, and I think she makes $19,500. She's got 35 or almost 40 years of legal experience working for my husband, Dan, and she's making $19,500. But she's not complaining. She's just glad to have a job after my husband died. But those are the things I'm talking about, the disparity in the people that you work with. Morale is bad.
Stuart, do you have other questions?
I'm trying to think the only other question. Oh, talk about a little bit about, it's always a touchy subject about how to deal with charging juveniles. Now, there's always been a big thing in Duval County. How do you, obviously everything should be taken, each case should be handled differently. How do you see things being handled at that level currently?
Well, as a matter of fact, I have a mailer going out on a case that to me was mishandled on the juvenile. It was a sexual battery case. It was a lewd and lascivious molestation. And the state attorney's office put that case on a deferred prosecution agreement. And after 4 months later, that same individual was picked up for burglary, and the state attorney's office was advised about the new charge, and instead of bringing the case back to Putnam County, nothing was done. And that same individual defendant went out and sexually battered a child 6 years old. So my position is, but for not being prosecuted originally on those kind of crimes, juvenile or not juvenile, not taken seriously with sexual offenders, we all know that pedophiles can't be helped, and we need to do something about it from the get-go, because I want to stop this revolving door of having these perpetrators come through and out, in and out, in and out, and it's got to stop.
You get to close us out with your final statement.
Well, you all have been very gracious in having me here today and letting me have so much time to talk about all these things that I want to do to change the office and get it back to where it was several years ago. And we have we have a lot of work to do, and I can't do it by myself. I'm just one person. But I think that if I partner with law enforcement as I should and communicate, they just want to be told what's going on. you can't leave them out of the loop. And they're putting their confidence in me and the public, and I just want to make a difference and be able to reach more people that I haven't been able to do from my position as a judge. I'd like to take all that experience and, with the community's help, do something. Thank you.
Stasia, thank